Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara Riska, life coach, wife, and the mother of 4 incredible and unique kids. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I completely lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and grace that once felt so completely lacking. I started the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves up against what feels impossible. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle the dreams that you hold impossible now. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you're a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. I am coming you today a little bit more tired than normal because I stayed up way later than I normally do. I went out down to San Diego for a baseball game. Go Padres. We did win. And I'm not used to staying out that late. And so I have had a hard time recovering from my little late night escapades. Although I will say it was very fun. I went with a girlfriend and it was fun to do something without the load of my children. There was a moment in the evening where, it was crowded, it's a baseball game, where I thought it is so nice to not have to walk around with children. All of my children, not just the special needs child that does walk a little bit more slowly than the others. So anyhow, that is a random side note. I'm going to tell you all about our guest today, but before I do, I want to make sure that you do know about the Own Your Story workshop that's coming up when you hear this. When you hear this episode, it's going to be coming up in, 2 days. It's Saturday, July 31st. Good news is, if you're listening to this on Thursday or Friday, there is still time and options to sign up. And I know it's last minute, but I also know that, you know what? We all roll last minute. And you thought when you heard about it a couple of weeks ago, oh, that might be nice. But you didn't feel like committing to a Saturday and you didn't know what was going to be happening. But as it turns out, you don't have anything going on Saturday morning from 9 to noon. And you do think it would be an amazing idea to spend time with other women in your community, exploring and mapping out some of the actual facts that have happened, but actually then creating a new narrative, a new story with them. What you may not know about your story is that you get to tell it however you want. All of it's an interpretation. And there's a lot of power in how you decide to interpret what it was so with your life. It's going to be really fun. I would love to have you there. Please consider joining us. What you need to do to sign up is just click on the show notes and there will be a link with all the information, and also easily contact me through either Insta or my contact me link, and we can talk. I will answer any questions that you have. Now, let's talk about Kayla Monville. I loved the conversation with her. She's a mother of 2 beautiful and perfect children with autism. And she's in education. She has her master's degree in special education from Saginaw Valley State University in Michigan. And she's been in education for over 10 years, both general and special education classrooms. Kayla has a passion for writing, photography, and travel. Her favorite pastime is sitting and reading a book while enjoying a cup of hot coffee. Isn't that a lovely picture? As a family, they enjoy time being outdoors, anywhere that is warm and where there is water. Kayla wrote a book this year, and Kayla hopes that families, educators, and professionals working with young children can use this book as a learning tool to promote acceptance, autism awareness, as well as celebrate the very things we love about our children and students. I hope you will check out her book. The link will be in the show notes, and I know that even just supporting this mom's commitment to putting her work out there, go buy the book. Spend a few dollars to say, hey, thanks. I want to support you. It means a lot. Let's get right into the episode. Enjoy. Kayla, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love meeting people that were once just a long distance away from Michigan to from San Diego. And then boom, through the invention of social media connection. And now we're here talking today.
Yes, I know. I saw your post and I had to reach out, and I love what you do and how you spread awareness and just a podcast that moms and other parents can relate to.
Yeah, right. I feel like there's so much out there helping kids, which is awesome. But come on, we got to help the moms.
Mm-hmm.
Moms in my book are where it's at. Okay. So I want to know, obviously I shared a little bit about you before in your introduction, but I would love to hear in your own words about kind of like maybe like a day in the life or like who you are as a special needs mom.
Yeah. So a day in the life in our house is different every single day. You would think that we would have it down to a routine and structure because that's exactly what they need, but it's definitely different every single day. So I have a lot of support with my family living so close. My mom lives right next door and she watches my kids while I'm at work. So my husband and I are both working. My husband travels for work. So that kind of throws a wrench into our schedule sometimes. And that can be hard. So we use lots of visuals, lots of prepping with our kids, letting them know. And, they've lived through this. He was traveling before they were born. So they know, dad's gone, and we count down the days and we have those things in place so that they're aware. But it's busy. We have OT therapy, occupational therapy, usually for my daughter twice a week outside of school. And then in the summers, we back down to once a week. My son has it once a week. They're both in school. We try to get them involved in something with the communities. My son's doing T-ball, and we're looking at something now that the COVID restrictions have lightened up for my daughter. So every day's different. It's busy. It's not like the typical parent, I said my son's in T-ball, but usually, the parents are filling their time with running their kids to friend's house and dance and karate or whatnot. But ours is more like, what therapies can we get in? What insurance do I need to call when I get out of work? Just like I got the bill in, yesterday, I'm like, okay, this isn't right. They're not billing something right, and having to figure that out. I feel like a lot of our time is just spent differently, but it's good.
It's funny. I'm kind of laughing on the inside as you say that. I was like, the hobbies of special needs moms include calling
Right.
insurances and bringing the kids to therapies instead of maybe some recreational sports. I so both of your kids are on the autism spectrum. Your 7 and 5 year old, and as we know, it's a spectrum. And I'm intrigued to hear your son plays t-ball, yeah, on a team. So I don't know. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that's going and how it is for you to support him amongst the community, if you will.
Yeah, we started T-ball when he was 4, 2 years ago, and we thought it would be great for him. He liked to play it in the backyard. He's verbal, so he's able to express when he's getting overwhelmed or overstimulated, but usually it comes out, in behaviors. And 2 years ago, it was rough. It took, my mom would watch my daughter. We usually would have my brother, who's, his uncle, come out on the field with us. My husband would be out in the field with him, and then I would be in the dugout managing. And it took 3 of us, 3-1. But we're so glad we did that, because those experiences now translated into 2 years later, and he's able to stand out on the field. He has to have a lot of guidance and just focus, make sure you're watching the ball so it doesn't hit you. But it's T-ball.
He's also 5, right?
Yeah, so they're all
yes.
playing in the sand and running around, and he doesn't look any different than any of the other kids. So he had the option to move up being 7, but because he didn't play last year, we wanted him to have another year to learn the fundamentals, and he's doing really well. His team, is ages 4 to 7. He's got another 7-year-old on the team, and they're all super supportive of each other. The moms are in the dugout helping out. The dads are out on the field. They're all just working together to herd cats, basically, when you have 10 to 12, 4 to 7-year-olds. But no, he has been, there's SJ, and everybody just kind of knows SJ, and he's very social, and they're patient with him.
Well, okay. So I recently had an experience where my 12-year-old son, who is my special needs son, he was participating in what's called Kids Games. And it's essentially like a vacation Bible school concept. It's not called that, vacation. Yeah, maybe whatever. Church camp.
Right.
And he was one of those things. So he's very able in a lot of ways. But I also feel like because he's also not like, I guess, my typical kids where I'm like, all right, go have fun, enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Where I feel like what I noticed for myself is oh my gosh, what do I share with people? Who do I share it with? How is this not even supposed to go? But how do I navigate this was ultimately what I was confronted with. And I awkwardly stumbled through it. And so I guess I would be curious just to hear hey, how's another mom do it? Do you talk a lot to the coaches, or do you share with everybody? Hey, this is, you said SJ, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is his story. How do you choose to kind of represent your son?
We kind of do it on a need to know basis. We live in a small community, so a lot of people just know us and him. I'm a teacher in the community also. And then I've shared a lot about our personal life and my son and daughter's diagnosis, and between writing this book and, being on different podcasts and things like that, people get to know our story and they understand. We also try to do as much as we can in the community so that we're giving them those experiences and exposure so that they can learn. But it's kind of a need to know basis. I didn't just come right out and say to the coach, but when my husband, he wanted to help coach, but he knew traveling, he wouldn't be able to be the main coach. And we knew we needed somebody there because like you said, we're not sure what supports he's going to need. And we don't want to just throw him out there and swim or sink.
Yes.
So kind of have him some supports there. But we let the recreational department, know, hey, our son does have autism. We would like him to be put on a team with a coach that is very understanding, that's okay with that. And our first coach was just amazing with him, especially with the needs that my son had with running all over the field, running away from the field. He constantly had to be almost like a one-on-one. And this coach is no different. They are just so receptive. They accept all his hugs and he will pull them down, and even he does some stimming on their faces. And at first they're like, oh no, what is he doing? He's going to hit me. But then when they realize, oh, Esther's just such a lover, they are so receptive of it. So we felt like they needed to know. But as far as like the parents and those kind of things, if they're working in the dugout, I would say to one of the dugout moms, because there was a dugout mom that she ended up having a child with autism on the team as well. So she noticed signs of our son and was kind of like, hey, and she let me know about her son. And I was, an opening for us to be like, yeah, me too. Okay, cool. We got 2 kids on the team and we got this, like, we know how to support them. And so I don't know if they did that purposely so that they were together and have the supports they need. But we don't just usually open up our conversations like that. Like, hey, we have 2 kids with autism and here they are, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
people have questions, or especially kids, like they'll ask like why my daughter's not talking and she's 5, and they'll say, why isn't she talking? Or they'll try to talk to her and she doesn't talk back and she's still in diapers. She's not quite ready for potty training yet. And they'll say, is she a baby or something? She's kind of big because she's really tall.
Like that's the question. Like, that's weird. Like, she's a very big baby.
Yeah, she's a big baby. She doesn't talk to her diapers though. Those are 2 signs of babies. And so we have those conversations and kids kind of open those up for us.
Yes, kids are good at that. Backing up a second, you reminded me, I guess it was spring break. I went on a little trip and we had our dog with us. And so we were we were on the coast up in California and we were looking at the elephant seals. So it was like a very public area. And we were walking out on this boardwalk and I noticed that there was a boy, although he was, I guess probably more described as a young man. And he was very clearly agitated by the dog. And I became aware of it. And then we kind of tried to like make sure that we weren't like, confronting him. And I don't remember exactly what indicated to me like, oh, okay. Like, I think that he, I don't know what his needs were, but I was like, okay, I think like I saw the way his mom was supporting him. I was like, oh, okay, I got you, lady. And I was like, we need like a gang sign from special needs mom to special needs mom to be like, oh, I see you and I got you. Like, I got your back. Cause like I noticed it right away. And then I, of course, like was like, okay, yes, let's like remove the dog. Like, this boy does not need to worry about this dog. I was like, we just need a sign. We need a sign. Like,
yes, because they know the sign, they say it back and you're like, oh, we're part of, we're all one. We get each other. We can feel comfortable.
Yes. Or even like, okay, so this was maybe not this week, but last week, my family, my kids and I, my husband was not with us. We were getting ice cream and there's a new ice cream store that opened up by our house and we are becoming regulars. And so we were out there and we had some explosions, which are not uncommon for us. And so it was a little, like a scene, right? We made a scene.
Exposed, yeah.
Which is not rare, but unfortunately it is still a scene. And so my 13-year-old gets so embarrassed and I get it. But anyhow, that's just part of how we roll. And there was this older couple, and this is like a midday ice cream, right? So one, you already respect and like people that are older and having a midday ice cream. And so they were kind of watching the whole thing go down. And in the back of my head, I'm always like, I wonder what's going on in their mind. Anyhow, so they were kind of seeing the whole thing. And then when we were kind of backing out, leaving, the woman just kind of like waved at me in a way, like she didn't have to, right? Like we hadn't ever talked, but I interpreted it as like, she had me, like she got me,
Yeah,
and I
got you, Mom. It's hanging there.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciated that. Like, as far as like, because I actually in that moment I'm getting better and not feeling like, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at me. If you do something long enough, you get better at it, it turns out. But in this case, I just really appreciated her gesture. So I don't know.
I think it gets better as they get older because you have gone through so many more experiences that you're not on that fight or flight as much as you are when they were so young and it's so new, because it's going to happen. And if you have tricks in your bag and you're more prepared, where when it's so new and it happens, you just feel like a failure as a mom. Everybody's judging you. Everybody's looking at you. You can't make it stop. And I feel like as the experiences happen and the years go on, you almost get to a point where you're like, okay, I know I can't make this stop. And I know everybody's probably looking at me, but they're not judging me as hard as I feel like they are, because I've been here before. We're going to get through this. And they're probably going, gosh, how can I help? Where I didn't realize that before I was like, they're judging me. They're looking at me. They're wanting me to stop. They're annoyed. I'm ruining their experience. Those things are running through your head. And really they're just like, oh, I want to help that mom, but I don't know how, because that might be overstepping that or being overbearing, or I don't know them. So
yeah, I love the way that you kind of show the difference in the way that you can think about what's happening for somebody else, right? Because actually this happens a lot as I'm working with moms, is that one of the things that I think most people don't like is feeling judged, right? I don't know that anybody likes feeling that. And when you have children that go out in the world and don't do what's expected, right? Like the typical behavior, then of course it's understandable why mom might feel judged. And I love the way that you kind of put it into like, yeah, they might be saying, whoa, that lady needs to learn to discipline her child. Or they might be saying something like, wow, I wish I could help that mom. Or that mom's doing a freaking phenomenal job. And that it honestly doesn't matter what they're thinking, but what you tell yourself that they're thinking actually will totally change your experience of being out there. And to your point that I don't know if I would say it gets easier, but I would say I get better at it.
Right. I agree. Yeah, it doesn't ever get easy. There was a time, this is like when you see those like Instagram things, like show a time when you were at your lowest kind of thing and nobody knew. So my son was 3 and my daughter was 1. So they're exactly 2 years apart. And we were at this small town kids day, right? So like the town I'm from, everybody's there. My son's diagnosis was really, really new. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. It's super hot out. So I'm going to pack my kids up and we're going to go to this because there's his favorite things there. There was like a little horse ride. There's a bounce house. The firefighters were there to spray water. This is going to be great. So we get there and within seconds, it turned not great. And thankfully, my mom was with me and she had my daughter who was little, and we waited in line for it felt like an hour, but it was probably 15 minutes to ride this horse. And the whole time my son is screaming and kicking me and hitting me and scratching, and everybody's looking at us. And it felt like that anyways. They're moving away from us, but nobody said like, ask to help. So I felt like even worse, like then people that knew me would try to come talk to me and they're like, okay, you're busy. And like, walk away. It's so embarrassing. And then he gets on this horse and he literally walks around a small circle that takes less than 20 seconds. And I knew this because I'm watching all these kids do this, right? But I'm like, oh gosh, please, maybe they'll let him go twice. Well, of course they don't, because they're not going to make special, arrangements for just him when all the other kids are waiting the same amount of time. And during this time, this lady takes a picture of my son on the horse because he is just the cutest and he's got this big old smile. He is just happier, as happy as can be. And she's from like the Daily Reporter. And I'm like,
that's great.
Oh my gosh, she is going to take this picture and she's going to put this like as the picture for Kids Day. And everybody's going to go, that kid only was quiet when he was on that horse.
Like, we know that kid.
His mom. And it was just so embarrassing. So I had to go over and ask and say, and thankfully I knew her from like my childhood. She was a peer pro at the school, and say, please do not post that picture. Keep it for yourself. Do whatever you want with it. But this is the experience that, it looked great. Like, people post those things on social media. It looked great in that moment. It was not. We ended up having to leave. It was like, I just felt like such a low point. Like, I don't know how I'm going to navigate this. I know I'm a special ed teacher and I know how to do this, but when you're a parent, it is so different. When it's your kid, it's so different. I could have all of the resources at my tip, but then just doing it was just like, I don't know. It was hard.
I think
have everything you need.
I think a lot of the moms our listeners are going to be like, yeah, there's that moment that I thought this was going to be really fun and a great plan, and it was not. So,
right.
Oh man. Oh, the stories. So you had your first child, and was your first child diagnosed prior to you having your second child?
No, we saw signs when I was pregnant with my daughter. And, looking back, there was lots of signs, but I thought I was being really hard on my kid because of my background.
Oh, yeah.
So even my husband would say, like, don't special ed our kid. Like, just because you teach special education and you see these signs and symptoms doesn't mean he's doing those. And I'm like, but he is doing those. But I thought maybe I was just being hard. And when he wasn't meeting his milestones, I'm like, I'd make excuses. Well, he's a boy. His language will develop slower. But then when we had my daughter, that was just such a hard time because it was very apparent when we had her, like, that he was. So I just have this newborn. And then, we were looking at getting a referral for the diagnosis process for him. So he was 2 years, 10 months when we ended up getting him officially diagnosed. And my daughter was 1 year, 10 months because we saw the signs, the same time we saw with my sons, but we knew at that time we were past that denial phase.
Yeah. So so was their diagnosis like right around the same time not same time. What am I saying? The time that you learned that one was on the spectrum was around the same time that you learned the other one is what I'm thinking, right?
Like we saw the signs at the same time. Like my son had 11 when he was 11 months old, right before he even turned a year old, we had a doctor's appointment and like the doctor was just like, oh my gosh, look at how many words he's saying. Like he would say, people would walk by and he'd always say, hey, to get their attention at him. Hey. And then he would say our dog's name's Maggie and he'd call her Aggie. He said, mom, dad, hi, bye, waved. I mean, he did all of these things and his vocab was really strong. And then it was like a couple months after his first birthday, he just stopped talking. Like he stopped saying, hey, and mom and our dog and calling, and the eye contact wasn't there. Just like he completely regressed. And he was a hard baby. Like when I was pregnant with him, we were pregnant with twins and we lost the twin. And then he was born 6 weeks early, but he was 7 pounds, 2 ounces. And people are always like, are you sure you were on track? And I'm like, yeah, we only tried for a month. We knew, everything with him, but then he was colicky. I mean, he was a tough baby. He was hospitalized because he wasn't fully developed, right after he was born. He had jaundice. And so the first year of his life was tough. He had laid funny and he had torticollis, so his neck muscles were shortened. And
I've had two that have had that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they had to wear the helmet. So we had lots of drives up to, University of Michigan, a couple hours away, and things were tough that first year. And then there were, babies when they're two can be a tough age. And we had another one.
It did.
Yeah. So it was
the question I was going to ask, and it sounds like it doesn't apply, is like, did it make it, what was it like having the second diagnosis when you already had the one? And I was thinking if there was a time gap between it, I don't know, maybe it
there was a time. So we noticed the signs. Yeah, we noticed the signs, but there was a time gap. So when my son was diagnosed, that's when my daughter started showing signs. But we had already knew he was. We were just on such a long wait list to get him diagnosed that he was already receiving early on services, and we were already in speech and those kind of things. So there was. And when it's funny because when the early on special ed teacher was coming to the house and working with my son and my daughter was born, that's when he was still receiving services then. She was just so alert. My daughter, she was just so alert. She was meeting her milestones. She was just strong. And the special ed teacher looked at me and said, well, I guess after him, I'll be done. I won't be seeing you anymore because she is just doing so fantastic. I think she'll be fine. And then when I called early on services and she saw my name, come across that again, she was just like, no way. I was there in that house for a year. I saw her daughter, like, there's no way she's autistic. And then when she came and visited, she was like, that is so crazy because you wouldn't have guessed that her first, 8 months of life, like she was just such a happy, just beautiful, smiley, on target for everything baby. So
what was it like then? So imagine you maybe felt relief at that point that like, oh, looks like she's not going to have the same struggles as my son does. And what was it like when you thought, oh, I'm not right about that?
That was tough, especially because my husband and I, we wanted a lot of kids. Like we wanted to have 5 kids, and the work that we had with our 2 was so overwhelming that it was like we had 5 kids, just, bringing them everywhere, their extra needs that they had. And we just knew at that moment that we were done. Like it wouldn't be fair for them. Where in our mind with our son being autistic, and we thought our daughter was going to be typical, and she ended up becoming more severe and having more needs than him. We felt like, oh, we originally wanted lots of kids so that they had each other like after us. And now they don't have anybody after us. Like they have each other still, but like who's going to help take care of them? Like their cousins are older. Everybody's older than them, somebody younger. And we thought like we would give them lots of siblings to love and to have lots of love around them and that are understanding and be able to support them with what they need. And when they went to school, they looked out for them and they educated others about them. And now it was just kind of that heartbreak and that reality of we just can't, it's not fair to the two we have to keep having more kids. And we don't know what that looks like. It's obviously genetic, and we have 2 with autism. Having 3 would really restrain us in our marriage and, our support system. Like my mom is handling 2 kids, with autism while at work. To give her 3, like that would be tough. And that's just assuming we'd have another one, but we just couldn't take those chances.
Yeah. And I think that's such a individual decision that people do wrestle with. And it definitely comes up a lot in the conversations of special needs moms and whether it's a kind of a neurological situation or whether there's medical needs or genetic differences. So,
right.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience on that, or just even your thought process. And
that was just, my husband and I. Other families, they have their own struggles.
Yeah, it's so unique.
But with my husband traveling and, I work full time and I love my job, and to manage, family, having 2 kids is a lot of work, as it is, but it just wasn't, we felt for our family situation, I guess it wasn't fair because we were putting so much time and energy into our kids and giving them the resources that we needed to bring another one in. We just didn't know what that would look like for us, but our hearts are full and we are happy with the 2, children that we have to love on.
Yeah, definitely. Well, understandable for sure. So, I don't know why this question came up, but maybe because, so I recorded an episode with a gal named Madeline, and she runs the Rare Life podcast. And so her son, has a rare disease, and my son's situations are considered rare. And so we had a really interesting conversation about jealousy diagnosis. And one of the things that comes up, and you may not know this being an autism mom, if you will, is that it's because it takes 15 minutes to explain my son's medical situation to people, or even just all the things. It takes a very long time. That we had this interesting, humorous conversation, kind of outing ourselves for thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we could just say autism and everybody would understand what it was like? And I know that's not true. Or say maybe a different thing that just people in the community think they know what
that are more aware of. Down syndrome. Yeah, people know what that is. And
so I was curious because obviously, so I was curious on what assumptions special needs moms make about you as a mom of children with autism.
I don't know. I mean,
maybe they don't, maybe you don't. I was just curious as because here's where kind of I was wondering is I feel oh, I know what it's like to be a special needs mom because I am one, right? But special needs mom is a very broad term, very broad. It could mean so many different things. And so I feel I was wondering if people assume, oh, I get it. When you're no, you don't get this part.
I think they related to their experiences. And if and almost I hear people all the time will say to me, when I talk about my kids and having autism, they'll say, oh, Rain Man, or they must have this special, gift. And I'm
but yeah, that's probably more typical community mom. That's probably people that are very unaware.
Yes. Yeah. And even special needs, moms, if they're not familiar with autism and they know it's a spectrum, they know it's a hot word right now, with, people being diagnosed with 1 in 54. but they don't know, our day-to-day life looks very similar. Like, especially, it depends. Like my son, the things that we went through very early on, and how much time and energy we put into him, he's able to accomplish so much now, and given him those skills. That's what we wanted. My daughter, she's very much, there's a lot of other medical things that are going on with her too. Like, she has a lot of gastro, issues, cognitive issues. Like I said, she's 5, she's nonverbal, she's not potty trained. She is a special needs child. And so even though she's autistic, that's one part of it. She doesn't sleep. So we will be up all night. So I run on coffee and hope.
Coffee and hope. I like that.
It's just, it's just it is still a broad term, even though people are more familiar with it, they're not familiar with what I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
Like, I was a special education teacher, and I had lots of kids with autism, and every single one is different. So if I treated each one the same, it would never work. Like my boys were very different than my girls. And even just individually, what triggered them, what motivated them, what resources I needed to have for them were just different. And I think that's what's not communicated to others is, yes, we have this little sense of community of being autism mom or autism parent, but we're all have a different story and different needs. Like, I can't relate to some of my, friends that will, reach out to me that have a child with autism and say, my child's doing this, 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 and this. Has your child ever done that before? And I'm like, no. I mean, I can give you special ed advice, but as a parent, like, my experience is just so different than yours. And I think that's not communicated. It's not all what you see like on TV with how people are portrayed with autism and how, we're going to support them this way. Like, there's no, in public bathrooms, there's no adult changing tables. Like, that meets the needs for my daughter. Same with the special needs parents, any special needs parents. Like, my child with autism also needs that. Like, so we're all in the same community, I think, but, broad-wise special needs parenting, we're all in the same community. And then when we're shrinking it, for my specific diagnosis for the children, it's autism, but there's other things going on with them that are special needs. I don't know if I explained that.
No, it makes total sense. And I think the point of the episode that I did with Madeline was really kind of exposing what I would call, as a coach, thought errors, where it's like that I know it's not true that just because you have this one word that describes part of your picture that like instantly everybody understands. I know that's not true, but I think it's like you always look at people as the human nature. You always look like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if that's the case?
Right.
We just find evidence to say, oh, that's better.
Right. Well, it's true, when you're out in public and you say to somebody, yes, sorry, I just want to explain my child is autistic. People can relate to that because they know somebody with autism. They have a family member, or they had somebody on their child's baseball team with autism. So they're like, okay, yeah, they just struggle with these things, sensory stuff and this. When that's just part of the story, it's not the whole story, or it doesn't relate to me. But I can understand where you're coming from when you say like, okay, my child has, and you have to go through like a list and they're like, what's that again? So, and
I wish people could see your face because you nailed it. Like, what? Because like even the words, I'm like, I still, after 10 years, I still can't spell some of these words successfully. I mean, am I a bad speller? Yeah, I am. But there's a lot of I's and a lot of P's and a lot of T's and
yeah, like you don't know where the
panhypopituitarism. I should have to spell. That's one word. Panhypopituitarism.
Oh my!
One word. That's anyhow. We won't go into that. But thank you. Thanks for speaking to that a little bit. I always just find, I don't know, it's just interesting, I think, to kind of think about, us out there in the wild of what it's like, kind of trying to, advocate
for support groups. If you want something specific that other people know, what do you type in? Where I know I can type in autism, and
that's a good question. And I think so I have to look at all the different areas of my son's needs almost as like individual. So there's not going to be a group where I can like type it all in. There's like, maybe there's a person in the world that has all the things that he does. I have no idea.
But you still have to list them and then find that person. And then you two are now a team.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
still don't have a group, like a group.
Yeah. And so I think that we have to so backing up a little bit, the special needs moms that I work with, I'd say number one thing is believing. And again, I would say this is a thought error as well, that nobody understands. So we go out there in the world and we're like, nobody understands, nobody gets it. And like, we kind of feel upset about it. And also isolated, right? So I also hear the words that are the loudest from this community is I feel alone and I feel isolated. And if I look and break it down, the way that I work with people is the reason we feel isolated is because we're believing that nobody gets it. Okay. So if we believe that nobody gets it, and we feel alone, we're likely going to go out there and we're not going to open up to people. We're not going to attempt to connect to people. We're not going to give people a chance. We're not going to recognize that it doesn't really matter that my son has hemiplegia and your son hugs people is what you shared, that we actually have a lot to connect on, that we don't have to have our child have the same experience exactly to actually get each other. And so you can tell I'm a little fired up now because I think that we as special needs moms are doing ourselves a huge disservice by constantly telling ourselves a lie. Something I don't think we think it's a lie. I think we think it might be a little bit true, but I'm saying I don't think it's true at all that nobody can get it.
Right.
I say give people a chance. Some people might let you down. Some people may not be interested, but some people may. And so it's like we have to be willing to put ourselves out there to give people a chance to actually change it from nobody's going to get it to I'm going to find a mom who gets me. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. I'm a little hot and sweaty now. I'm like fired up. I'm good. Okay.
It means that you're passionate about it. And it's true. Sometimes we tell ourselves this because we're afraid of failure. We're afraid of putting ourselves out there because we have seen time and time again that we're the only one that's going to this thing and our kid is the only one having an issue with this thing, or the bathroom situation only applies to my family. And so I'm not going to advocate for it because it's only me and nobody else understands. You start telling yourself that, and it's almost that excuse so that, because it's fear. Like I used to do that a lot, especially when the kids were really young. I didn't want to go places because of that fear. And I just felt like no one's going to understand. They're going to have a meltdown and no one's going to get it. And I'm going to have to explain to them. And I don't want to have to explain to them. I want them to just look away. But really, there's probably other moms there that appreciated that. Okay, they're having a meltdown. And like you said, if we had this like gang sign that was like, gotcha, like, we could throw one up and get whatever each other needed, or just know that, oh yeah, you get it too. And I'm not a bad parent, because that's what we start internalizing is I'm a bad parent. It's not that people don't get
worse, they think I'm a bad parent.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to make some special needs mom podcast swag shirts, and it's going to have like the gang sign on it with like a thing, or like hats with a sign. And so, we can like start a movement. Right. I don't know. Anyhow, okay. Let that be a side note. Okay. I want to actually get to something that's really important. And I want to hear about how you went from being a mom that has 2 children that are on the spectrum and also a special education teacher to being an author of a children's book. So tell us all about that. Before you tell us about the book, I want to hear about how the book came to be.
Well, I always thought I would write something special education, like 101, or for parents, or help, resources for teachers, something adult focused. And during this pandemic, when everything shut down, I wanted to make the best use of my time. And I thought, oh my goodness, like we all needed something for our mental health. And mine was writing. And I thought, I started writing, about my experiences and just stories. And I thought, I think I want to go a different direction with this. My husband and I were talking about our children's diagnosis process and how difficult that was, especially for him. I knew why we were having those conversations. I sat in those conversations with parents, but when it's you and you're talking about your child, it's just really hard. So I felt like I was able to turn on a hat that he didn't have. And I was talking about my kid almost like he wasn't mine. Like I was just sharing data. And my husband was really defensive during the diagnosis, especially for my son. And he would say things like, they would say, is he talking? Does he have any words? And he'd say, yeah, he does. And I said, that's babble. When he says baba, da, da, he's not saying anything like that. And he's like, yes, it is. He's like, show me, he would get really scientific. Show me in the brain where that's not, a word, or, like that. And he'd get defensive because he didn't want to sit there and say all these bad things or what you felt like were negative things about the child. And we left with a folder at the very end. They said, here's our recommendation and here's the services we think your child could really benefit from. And here's a packet with all the resources in your area. And we're like, okay, hold on a minute. We open the folder, we look at our area, and there's nothing. There is nothing close to us. So they're like, well, do you want to move? No.
They asked you that?
Yeah. Like there's lots of resources here if you are willing to move. No. So how do we get resources here? So there's a lot more here now than there was, 5 years ago when my child was diagnosed. But we left on our way home and we were all just like overstimulated, all of us. Like we were in a bad mood. My son ended up throwing up as soon as he walked in the door because of all of that stimulation. And, my husband and I were talking about that experience. I said, if I were just handed something positive or something was said positive that gave me hope, I would have not felt like, okay, here's a diagnosis and here's no resources and good luck, mom and dad,
Yeah, we got this.
Yeah, we got it. Right. And
I believe in you.
At moving and everything. Like, we're like, okay, we got to move. We have to find resources. But if I was just handed something like this book and it's just, it's a simple autism inspired, I love you book, but it has some teachable words at the very beginning. It's a conversation tool that opens it up for families to be able to share with their siblings, to share with their cousins, even for teachers that have in the classroom. That's an inclusive book that is celebrating the child. That would have made the difference. Like them saying, I know you had a really difficult time, sharing all of these delays and these things about your child that might be different than their peers. And we appreciate you doing it so that we can make an informed decision for your child and give you the resources and supports. And here's one of them. And just giving me that, it would have been like, oh, they did actually appreciate the things that we were saying about our child. Because a lot of the things we were saying, like with our daughter, she does flap. My son does not. My son does other stimming things. But they would ask us, does your child flap? And with my daughter, we would say, yeah, I love that she flaps. So that we weren't saying like, yes, she flaps. That's different than other kids. Like normalizing some of those characteristics, but also giving them the data they need to make that informed decision. Because we knew with our son, we just didn't want to go through that same process and that feelings when we left of just saying all of this stuff in front of them and then leaving with no resources. So
yeah, definitely. So what's the name of the book that you wrote?
So it's called Rock With Me, Autism Inspired, I Love You Book.
I love it. And what's the most meaningful or significant part of the book or moment of the book?
Well, there's a couple things in here I love, but I love the whole thing, obviously, but I love the part, rock with me, flap with me, sing with me, dance with me, because that's something everyone can relate to. Flapping is one of the words at the very front of the book, and it expresses dancing with our hands, normalizing some of those characteristics. And then stimming. So there's a part in the book that says, I love the world through your view, moving, dancing, and stimming too. So just giving some parents that lingo, because a lot of parents will enter this diagnosis and then they hear terms like stimming and they're like, what is that? What's stimming? What am I supposed to be looking for? Am I supposed to stop that? He needs to stop that. Like, no, if they're not, it's not harmful stimming, then no. And we all stim, we all do something that calms our nervous system when we're excited or, nervous. So I like that part is important for parents to be able to say that we do like, when our child does some of their stimming, that's who they are.
I love that. Cause I think what it does is I think that, I don't know, this probably is outdated, but the idea that stimming could be bad, it's always through the negative lens, oh no, they're stimming, they're different, right? That hopefully is now older narrative, but I love that it is bringing into the mainstream conversation, what is stimming, and it's not bad. Yes, it's different. Not everybody does it, but it's kind of, I don't even want to say normalizing it because I don't know that we have to normalize it, but it's recognizing it.
Right.
It's being familiar with something. That's what it is. It's being familiar with something.
Normalizing, I would say is appropriate too, because once we know that why they're doing it and that they are, it's just nobody even notices that about my daughter anymore. It's not something they point out anymore. It's part of who she is. And it's part of our, family. It's not harmful to her. It's normal for her to do that. And it's other people had a problem with it. Now realizing, because they didn't understand it. Now that they understand it, they're like, oh yeah, she's just doing it because she's excited. It's normalizing it.
Well, and then also, yeah,
in a healthy way.
Yeah. Then you said something like that. Probably the average person, non-spectrum related person probably has things that they do. I was like, oh gosh, I would love to watch myself because I'm sure I have things I do.
Yes,
I'm excited or nervous.
Does. My mom twirls her hair often, all the time, and that's a part of stimming.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know my one of my sons has long hair now, and he keeps sucking on it, and it's it's a normal thing, right? But I'm trying to help him break himself of that habit, and it's not working. Okay, well, congratulations on writing a book. I think it is a really admirable accomplishment. And what do you hope people, and you shared a little bit about this, but let's narrow it down to one. If there was one thing that people could take from your book being out there in the world, what would it be for you?
Oh, there's so many. If I had to pick one, it's just that sense of appreciation for parents to understand, because this book it's written for so many people. It's written for parents and teachers and siblings and cousins and just everybody, therapists working with young children, but just that celebration of who they are, saying, there's so much I love about you. And at the very end, it says, there's no one in the world just like you. And it's so true about our children. There's no one in the world just like them. And it's more of a celebration, so that they feel that too, not just for that kid, but for them, expressing their love for their child, and for them to feel, your child to feel appreciated and understood.
I love that. It sounds really incredible. I can't wait to get my hands on it. So as we kind of wrap up, I don't ask this to every guest, but I thought I'm going to ask you. Sometimes I think it's fun to hear what we're really winning at in life and what we're really totally not winning at. So I'm going to ask you both ends of the spectrum, if you will. What do you feel like you're just nailing it in life right now?
I guess it depends on the day. Some days we're nailing it, and some days it's just crazy chaos. I would say just loving my kids. Like my husband and I go back to the fact that we can give them everything in the world. We can give them all the therapies, all of the support, but it comes down to in the home and just loving our kids and making them feel understood, appreciated, and loved. And we do spend that time with our kids. We have our kids, all the time, and they're loving, and it shows because our household is so loving. So I would say making sure our children feel that love from us.
And love, as we know, is a very powerful thing. So that's awesome. All right, let's hear the other side. What do you feel like you're like, wow?
Oh man, it's time management. So I just want to do so many things, and I have to stop myself and say, is that important right now? Is that a priority right now? Because like I said, I gave you some insight in my life, and I'm getting ready to go back to school, and there's so many things in the summer that I want to do, but I also work a lot in the summer and I teach a class at night, and I just wrote my second book. So that will be out this fall. So, doing all of those personal things and struggling with taking that time for myself to do those personal things, away from my kids, working full time. And then when I come home and I walk in that door, I want to be dedicated all to them and on the weekends. So just making sure I find that balance, because there's days I'm like, oh yeah, we got so much accomplished today and we even had some really great family time. And then there's other days I just feel like, I just, I wish I wouldn't have done some of the things I did. I just took in the moment more. So I think that will always be kind of a struggle. We get things done, but just find out what are the priorities, what's important.
Yes, I find myself in the place of there's so many things I want to do. Really, I find myself in the place often where I have said yes and I realize, oh, I should have said no. And so because I have the desire to do a lot of things, or not, I should have said, I wish I said no. And in some cases I then go say no, or I decide, okay, I'm going to learn from that and say no next time, whether it's saying no to myself or saying no to somebody else. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's valuable to hear all the different sides, because, this podcast is not about pretty stories. And although you've made a pretty book, we know it's as a result of living some hard days and hard moments and hard conversations with the practitioners that have supported your family. Any last comments or final words as we wrap on up?
Yeah, I think some of my last comments I'd like to leave, parents with is, you got this. It's tough and life can be really hard. And sometimes you just have to let go, kind of that cliche of what you thought your life was going to be, and just embrace the moments that you have and what you are experiencing. And it's not going to be what you always imagined in this dream fantasy life, but no one's is. But you're doing a good job, and reach out for support and help, because others do, like you said, it can feel really lonely, but others do want to be invited into your world, and it makes a difference. So just keep working hard, keep loving your kids and showing them that love, and celebrate all the little accomplishments, because they are a big deal.
I love it. Kayla, thank you so much for being a guest, for reaching out, and for putting your work out into the world. I know it takes a lot to do that. And so I just honor your dedication to spreading a new message to the world.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun getting to know you and talking with you and sharing stories.
So there you have it. I really enjoyed the twists and turns that the conversation with Kayla went. And I want to leave you with two final notes as you wrap up this episode. Please, I know I haven't actually asked in a while. I would really be appreciative. I would be so grateful if you would take a moment or two to go rate and review the podcast. This is actually helpful in other moms being able to find it. Why? Because if you rate and review, it helps Apple Podcasts say, hey, other people want to see this podcast. And it also helps if you have comments about the podcast, it might welcome a different mom to check it out. So please consider spending a moment or two to do that. The other thing I want to make sure you know about is that I haven't mentioned it in a few weeks, I don't think, but Being Mom Together is a group coaching program that I have created for moms like you, moms that feel alone, moms that feel stuck, moms that feel anxious and overwhelmed. This is a community-based coaching program where you get the power of having individual customized coaching. This is not just a one size fits all kind of conversation. This is very individualized small group setting. So you get a lot of high touch attention, and you get the benefit of being in relationship with other moms. You get to watch other moms make transformations. You get to be inspired by them, and you get to inspire them. And so it's a beautiful concept of community, growth, collaboration even, and it has been, I'm going to say, one of the privileges of my life to be able to coach this community, to coach the groups that are currently going now, to see the steps that these moms have taken, the shift in outlook that they have on their life, and then the ripple effect that it has on their children and their other children besides their special needs child and their spouses and beyond. And I feel so honored. And so to learn more about this, I do typically an individual consultation because I do want to make sure it's a right community for you. And again, the link is on my show notes and you'll see it clearly. Just reach out if you have any questions, but more specifically, I encourage you to schedule some time with me this week. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.